One of the fun things I ran was the Canadian canoe trip, and the executive director at the time, Bob Sharp, he and I would go back and forth, and Bob often thought that a 2-week trip into Canada, going fishing and canoeing was really a vacation, and I told him, well, not when you're with 10 kids, 10 high school kids. Now this, at the time, was the boys' Canadian canoe trip, and over the 5-year period, I took 5 trips up there. Roth Holtz was my mentor for these Canadian canoe trips, and he had run these trips years before, so he was full of information, and we actually went back to the same spot that he had taken his high school boys 10, 20 years earlier. So this was fun for him to be able to pass the baton to me. And some of the trips that we took, it was just amazing because you'd be out there for 10 days and you wouldn't see a soul. And I think for these boys, what an experience for them to really, all you had to worry about was getting from point A to point B, but the teamwork, team building concept that we instilled, I think to this day, these young men now, look back on those days and realize what a valuable experience it was. I do remember there was one year, the very last year that I took the trip, we had trouble filling 10 spots. We only had 8. And I was talking to one of the participants, Peter Frankel, who is now very active in the Y. I said, do you know anybody who would be interested in going on this trip? And he said, well, sure. He said, there's 2 girls that are on the Evanston diving team. They're good friends of mine. They'd be interested. And, of course, we had never done a co-ed Canadian canoe trip. And perhaps this was the very beginning of the youth department that eventually came to pass. But we agreed, and we got permission from parents and the Y to do a co-ed trip. And everybody did fine. We had a great time. Peter, actually, this last trip I took, my wife was pregnant, and we were having our first child. And fortunately, my son was not born while I was out in the wilderness. As soon as I got back, I made that phone call, and we realized, no, he was not born yet. But we had a reunion for the canoe trip probably 2 months later. And Peter Frankel gave a canoe paddle to me, a small little canoe paddle with my son Kyle's name on it and the date, 1981. And we still have that paddle today. And I just saw Peter 2 weeks ago up at the Camp Echo work weekend. And we had a fun time reminiscing about the canoe trips. And he was in the club programs also. And I think that speaks to the full circle, really, for so many of us, myself included, where we participated in activities. We were involved in Y Club programs, Camp Echo, Canadian canoe trips, like Peter, and then we end up giving back to the Y. And Peter, I know, has been a huge supporter of the Y over the last few years. And again, it's just fun to continue to reconnect with these people over and over again. Well, I think the thing about the Evanston Y is I can look back and see so many people in my life that have been part of the Y, the friends I still have, and how those people keep coming back to the Y. It's, again, that gathering point. There's something about the Y that draws people back to it. I think it probably goes back to the total circle, but in this particular case with the Y, it's a triangle. And the triangle is the mind, body, and spirit. And I think people yearn for that. I think people realize that they're not getting that in other programs, health clubs, that sort of thing. They look for ways to build their lives with the mind, body, and spirit. And I think the Y continues to provide that for people. And I think people will continue to come back. I'm sure other people, their children now are at the Y, and I hear stories now. I would bet 25, 30 years from now, if you do this film again, you'll have a whole new generation of people saying the exact same things that we're saying about how their parents and their grandparents were part of the Y. And people just keep coming back. And aren't we glad they do? I remember that when I was probably 10 years old, up at Camp Echo, one of the images that was imprinted in my brain to this day is at the end of every closing campfire, the triangle for the mind, body, and spirit was lit in a very huge triangle across the lake. So we're sitting at dusk, and the lake is still across at Camp Echo, and you see them talking about the mind, body, and spirit to all of us. And at each moment they're lighting one portion of the triangle. And that's one image that remains with me to this day. Lifelong friendships, certainly Bill Geiger bringing me back into the Y when I was in my mid-20s. And we were actually friends in high school, and we continued on to be very good friends during our Y years, and it's nice to see Bill back as the executive director at the Y, and he's actually drawn me back into the Y again. He's pulled me back in, getting me up to work weekends at Camp Echo, but it's been fun reconnecting with everyone, and certainly that's one friendship that's lasting forever. But there are so many people that I've been in contact with over the years that have remained friends, and it's because of the Y. And I was thinking recently, I wonder if the Y was not there, what would my life be like? And I thought, well, for one, I wouldn't know my wife, because I wouldn't have met her in Brilliantine, wouldn't have learned the things I learned at Camp Echo, the canoeing, the skiing, water skiing, some of those things. Would not have learned how to play guitar. Bob Tarkington teaching me how to play guitar when I was a younger staff member. So there was lots of things about the Y that I would not have the memories I have or the relationships I have without the Y being there. So I'm hoping the Y will always be there for people to have those great memories. One of the things that has been fun for me is when I went on the Camp Echo canoe trips, we always kind of went on the shorter Pine River trip. And again, had I not had that experience, I would not have been able to take my two kids down the Pine River. I did that when both of my kids were in 8th grade. My daughter is a little bit younger than my son, but I took them each on separate trips, so it was a great bonding time, and I could share my experience, even though they were not Camp Echo kids. They chose different camps, but I wanted them to experience the Pine River as I experienced it as a kid. And then just this past Labor Day, my son and I went back. So he was there when he was in 8th grade, and now he's 28 years old, and we went down that same Pine River. So there's connections with, for me, it's always kind of been connection with outdoor camping type activities connected to the Y, and I've been able to pass those type of things along to my kids, which has been important for me to pass that along. Well, one of my favorite memories about Brilliantine was we were having this big rehearsal, and everybody was in the rehearsal room, and Mr. Hanley, Bob Hanley, was the director at the time, announced to all of us, we're all done, everything's finished. And my wife, then Sherry Model, says to Mr. Hanley, we haven't rehearsed the kiss scene. And she just turned bright red because Bob Hanley goes, oh, everybody got to sit down, you got to watch this kiss scene. We have to rehearse the kiss scene. And so we did the scene, and during the scene, she was supposed to take a piece of paper out of her pocket and throw it away. And during the kiss scene, she forgot. So we're still kissing, and Mr. Hanley finally says, Sherry, you have to take the paper out of your pocket now. Of course, she forgot and she turned bright red, embarrassed. But that was our first kiss, and certainly one of our better kisses, I guess. And eventually we became married. So that was a fun memory.